Welcome students for UGC sponsored PG Pathshala for architecture students. Today we will be discussing about cartography and map making, the method of preparing a map or map making in general. Many a times people generally get confused or feel that GIS is nothing but cartography. It is not true. You should understand that or know that cartography and map making is an exclusive or independent process, whereas GIS, as all of you know, it is not cartography. In fact, we say that computer assisted cartography is GIS. So, it is actually cartography which has come into the existence for a long time it is there, and GIS is a new tool wherein which the advent of say computers and the process of spatial analysis has introduced the concept of GIS. Otherwise, cartography is as old as 100 AD. So, it is almost 2000 years old. So, you should know that how cartography has evolved, what are the intricacies, the difficulties in preparing a map, how do you prepare a map meant for an exclusive or a specific purpose, how do you give the aesthetic sense to a map. So, this is what we will be discussing today. Well, coming back to the mapping. So, we say that what are maps, what are the function or the role of a map. Maps are mainly meant for say a medium for information that a humanity need. Otherwise, we also provide a picture of the world to understand the spatial pattern, relationship and also the environmental complexity. Now, what do you understand from a map? What do you get to know about from a map? We say that where am I or where is it? So, what is it? If a specific thing is there, what is that? When is it? Sometimes you may also have an option to find out when is it happened, a kind of a incident if it had. What is nearby and from the point of my origin, how far is it away, in which direction, and to what extent how far it is, and is it possible for me to get over to that particular point. Say, is it possible to go to that particular point from my point of origin. And we also would like to know what are the other things which are there in the surrounding and what is the relationship between them. So, these are the various things we get from say a map. So, once we understand a map, it is very convenient for us to proceed with whatever we intend to do with a map. The purpose of the map is solved. As you see here, a map just indicating simple outline of various continents, the Asian, the African, the North and the South American and the Australian. Now, to go to, I was just telling you where am I. So, if I were somewhere standing in Asia, how far I should go or how long I should go to reach my destination in Africa or in Australia or in American continent. So, in which direction I am supposed to go, towards the east or the west or which direction from the point of origin. If I am supposed to reach a specific continent, how large it is, if I am intending to know the size of that and what could be the possible shape of that. Of course, that can be directly read from say a map, and these are the things what one can do with say with the help of a map. What does a map do to you? Like what are that you try to understand from a map, or what does it give to you in the sense a specific goal will be there. Almost all maps will have a similar goal, saying that it is to communicate about the spatial relationship. So, a spatial relationship, as I was just telling you, if I am at a particular place, I would like to know where I am located. If I also would like to know what is adjacent to me. I would also like to know how am I connected to various other places from the point. So, that is the reason we say spatial relationship. So, that is a very important aspect or a goal of a map. To achieve that, we have to work out in a proper fashion. Well, what we would like to also know what kind of a landscape I am looking at, or what kind of a landscape I will be intending to create or generate from a map. So, that is the very purpose of your map making or the role or the goal of a map rather. Now, coming back to the characteristics of map, like we say location, location or in one word, what is the position in two-dimensional space, or we say the attribution or attribute data, which we already seen while we are studying about or reading about GIS. Information or details about that particular object is the attribute data. So, we would like to know what are the various qualities of the magnitude of such as whether it is going to be about the language or it is going to be about the temperature. And then very importantly, reduction of say of the entire earth onto a sheet of paper or map rather. If you are going to do such a thing, is it possible for anybody to create or generate a map on 1:1 scale? It may not be possible at all, is not it? You agree with me? So, in such a case, what is the factor which is going to control that particular aspect of bringing the earth surface onto the sheet of paper? Obviously, it is nothing but the scale factor. Scale will decide what could be the various aspects of the components in a map. In the sense, if I were to show the earth as it is, it will not be possible for me to show it on a say a large scale. I may have to go for 1:2 million or 1:2 million, 3 million, 5 million and so on and so forth. If I were to show a specific building in a given terrain, then I have to show it on a very large scale. So, and so on and so forth, we find that to represent the features, the basic criteria is the scale of a map. So, we have to understand how we are going to represent the details from real world to sheet of paper. What is that we are trying to do with as far as maps are concerned? We talk about geometrical transformation, changing the data or transforming the data from real world to say the flat surface, something like a spherical object. We presume that earth is a spherical object. From a round object to a flat surface, just imagine it is going to be very tough for anybody to translate that particular aspect from round to flat surface. Similarly, I told you about attribution, data which is required about that particular object. We also talk about bringing into reality. Just now I told you how scale is important, and we cannot show all the details. So, we can show only a certain detail, namely environmental information on which can be fit into the system, not all of them. We can classify the data and we can also simplify the data, so that it will be easy to portray and understand the very purpose, say the symbolism, because the symbolism will stand say for elements of reality. So, to bring all this data onto a sheet of paper, we may have to project the data. So, we will see all those things at a later stage, but just to get to understand that making a map from say round to a flat surface, this was the very important aspect what you have to remember in mind. Now, what kind of location and attribution that will allow you to create any type of map which has also got some relationship? We have to say that or we have to define what is the relationship between locations which has no attributes. In the sense, many times you must be aware that people survey the data, but surveying we do not make any attributes, we just note down the attributes, we do not get any other attributes automatically, is not it? So, we go for the bearing and the distance. So, these are two factors which we use, in which there will be no attribute information, but it will be just bearing and distance measured using your surveying methods. Once I get that, I just translate that onto a sheet of paper. So, we have to know what is the relationship between or among locations which has no attributes, various attributes at the same point. Just to try to understand this relationship among various attributes at the same point. Like we would like to know about a specific building or a specific person, anytime, anywhere. For example, you would like to know about a specific person, you meet somebody, what is that you intend to do? Immediately ask for the name of the person. Of course, depending upon the kind of interaction you would like to have that gentleman, or the lady, you would like to ask certain things, details. If something like formal, you ask where are you working, what kind of a job you are doing. So, it is about the particular location, that particular person where he would like to, where he is staying. Whereas, if it is something different, personal, you would like to know about the parent's name, you would like to know who are all siblings and details like that. So, various details about a specific location, be it a person or a building. Something like a building, you would like to get the details of the building. What is the total area of the plot on which the building is standing? What could be the detail about the area of construction, the total plot area and the area of construction, and how many floors are there, what is the actual use it is put to. So, you understand what exactly getting details about that particular object. Object is one, but the attributes are more than one. Hence, the relationship which arises when you try to understand various attributes at the same point. We also talk about relationship among different locations of the same attribute. It's very interesting, isn't it? Attribute is the same, but the location is different. What is the relationship? For example, attribute here we would like to say something like rainfall. So, you cannot try to compare at a given time at a particular place of the rainfall. If you would like to know what is the rainfall over a given terrain of say 100 square kilometers, you cannot definitely have one particular meteorological station, you need to have more than one, or rain gauge station rather. So, you would like to have rain gauge stations at various places. The attribute is one, that is rainfall, but the locations are different. At various locations you would like to know the rainfall at a given time. Many times, unless otherwise it is seasonal rains, many people also will be discussed, I was just going around that place, there is no rain, and you may say, yeah, at my place it was raining. So, you know that this is what actually happens, isn't it? So, in that such context we say that attribute is one, rainfall, or for example, even population. Population is one attribute, whereas you are trying to understand the population at various places in a given terrain or area. So, such a thing is important as far as your relationship when you are talking about attribute being one and whereas the locations are different. We also talk about, I was just telling you sometimes about locations. At the same time, we would like to combine the data or derive that attribute of a given distribution. What exactly I mean by that given distribution is that I was just telling you about an example about say rainfall. So, the attribute may be rainfall at different places, that is spatial distribution, whereas I would like to compare something like capital income versus educational attainment. You get that now? So, when you talk about capital income and educational attainment, you would like to know is there any relationship between that, or just now I told you about the rainfall part of it. Rainfall patterns of a given terrain, how does it help you? In what way the rainfall is varying from one place to another place? Is there any variation of the rainfall in a terrain where you have any elevation effect? That means you just try to understand by deriving, that is what we call it as quantitative or qualitative information. You manipulate the data and try to understand that. So, this is what we say that relationship of combination of various factors and then getting some information from that. Very importantly, please understand that we try to classify maps based on various factors. For example, classification based on scale. It could be a small scale map, a medium scale map, or a large scale map, or it could be classified based on functionality, which normally we say general reference maps or thematic or spatial maps which are special purpose. Okay. We also have charts. Sometimes classification is based on subject matter. It could be a cadastral map, it should be a plan, or it could be a thematic map like soil, vegetation, geology, precipitation, etc. Because various varieties are there. So, based on our requirement, based on the skills of the say a cartographer, these maps are designed and then generated. It is a very, very difficult process. Of course, people are using it or trying to develop maps or draw maps in the primitive ages in different manners. We will see that a little later. Nowadays, we have the advent of computers, which will help us to create beautiful maps. As I was just telling you, the purpose of cartography to communicate environmental information. So, I was just telling you that the task of the designer is to enhance the map user's ability and to retrieve information. That means, if I am looking at the map, even a layman should be capable of understanding that, isn't it? It is not that maps are meant only for educated people. Even illiterate should be in a position to understand. In the sense, I am not saying that people who cannot read, at least people who can read, but not well educated. Such people should also be in a position to understand a map, or people who are not related to that particular discipline. It could be an economist, it could be an IT professional who is not at all related to a map. He may not even know, of course, he must have studied in his school days, but still such a thing. So, any kind of a map which is developed or generated, created by a cartographer should have all the details in such a way it is understood by everybody. Well, coming to the next point, what are the factors or what are the details which are involved in information transformation? What kind of transformations or what kind of details are required? For example, data collection. You collect huge data pertaining to a specific terrain, and it is not that you will be using all the data, but it is always required, whether it is a surveyor or you are a geologist or a pedologist, you try to collect as much as detail as possible from the field, because it will be inordinately expensive to go back to the field and collect information. You agree with me? So, collect the data as much as possible and then you can make a selection of the data. So, first collect all the data and make a selection or select the required details from the data collected. It is not that I just told you are going to use all the data all the time. It may not be useful, but does not mean you should not collect it. Every detail available on the ground should be collected, and then select the data which is relevant to that particular aspect of the map which I am going to prepare, and then put it there. So, that is what is the important aspect. Then classify the data. So, when I just say classification of data, I try to understand what kind of data I have collected, what am I going to do with that data. For example, I want to prepare a map of a given terrain, say a land or urban landscape. Normally, what are the things which will be present in such a scenario? You will have most important road network, then we will have various buildings on that, then you may have or may not have water bodies which may cut across or which may not be there at all. Well, such a thing, what we will be trying to do in that such a case, we will be trying to classify them, all roads in a particular class, all buildings in a particular class. Of course, we can also simplify them by understanding. So, for example, what are the roads which are present? It could be roads such as highways, it could be national highway, a state highway, or it could be a district highway or district road rather, or it could be a village or a tahsil road. So, you should simplify the data in such a way it will be convenient for the viewer or reader of the map to understand. So, simplification and classification, two factors. Sometimes you may have to exaggerate the data, because exaggeration, again please bear in mind, a cartographer should never lie. Of course, we will see the ethical part at the end of the lecture. What we should never do is that never lie. Exaggeration in the sense, many times we will be requiring to show a specific aspect which is more important than the other aspects. For example, I would like to highlight all the major roads in a given terrain. In such a case, I should not bother about the buildings in the surrounding. So, I may have to exaggerate the data in the sense not giving false information, but enhance the data. See that roads are depicted properly or symbolized properly. So, that is your exaggeration. Then we go symbolization. Symbolization, the most important aspect in a map making. In the sense, you will not have any option in a printed map to browse it, to edit it, to select it. Only option you have is to look at it. A printed map, which is what we will be intending to use at many places, will contain all the details whatever is relevant to that particular theme. It could be a general reference map or a thematic map, does not matter. The symbolization will play a huge role. Of course, that is I have just given a separate detail about that later, we will see in detail later. Then finally, we talk about the use of the map. What is the purpose or use of the map? What kind of utility or usage we intend or what are you going to do with that particular map? So, use of the map will play an important role in deciding various factors that we will see one after the other. Finally, we say that I was just telling you what is the task of a cartographer. So, we should try to find out or explore the ramification of every possible mapping facility and then choose the most appropriate task or intended task. You may have various factors, decide which is the best and a suitable task and then go ahead with that and then finalize that from various possibilities and decide one particular task. So, that is the role of a cartographer. Coming to the next aspect, as I was just telling you, main characteristics are processes. I was telling you about the collection and selection of data for mapping. I have just given you the detail then. Then manipulating and generalizing the data, designing the map and constructing the map. Again, I would like to say that manipulation and say your generalization, manipulation does not mean that I am trying to cook up the data. My intention is to manipulate the data in the sense to analyze the data, understand the data and as I was telling you the generalization, make it as simple as possible, make it as easy as possible for you to read. So, that is what is your manipulation and generalization of the data. Well, designing and constructing the map, the most important part in map making is your designing the map. How are you going to show the data? How are you going to show the map? What designs you are going to use? How it should be catchy to the eye? At the same time, what does it convey to the reader or a viewer? So, that is what is the designing part of it. That is the most important, the crucial part. However, the other aspects you can try to do something later, but once the design is final, once you print it, you cannot do anything with that. It cannot be updated. Finally, reading or viewing the map, and we also have to interpret the information presented on the map. That is the fourth point. So, reading or viewing the map, every person who is looking at the map will be intending to look at what is required for him. If somebody is looking for an ATM in a given location, he may be interested in more about ATM symbol or the proximity to his place of position and look at it. He may not be interested in other aspects, because at that instance he is very much interested in the ATM. Or if somebody is interested in a historical place, he may look at or try to find out where that any historical place is present in his purview. So, that is a reading or interpretability. So, interpretation, what kind of interpretation? It should not be very difficult or technical interpretation, simple. So, what we mean by interpretation in a given map for any person is that he should be able to understand in simple ways and means how to move about, how to go about, how to reach the point of destination from his point of origin. Interpretation does not mean you are aerial photo interpretation, where we try to get various pieces of data and interpret the data to get information. Here interpretation, simple words. He should be in a position to understand or look or read the map with ease. So, that is what is the interpretation part of it. Now, very important aspect or the characteristic of a cartographer is to have a idea about all the mapping activities, like say geodesy, surveying, photogrammetry, remote sensing and GIS. It is not that he should be master of all of them, but he should know all the details. Geodesy, how to bring or how to figure the world data onto a sheet of paper. Surveying, you try to make measurements on the surface of the earth, where you must have done a lot of surveying in your education while you are studying. So, that sort of a detail has to be captured and obtained. Of course, remote sensing, aerial photo working or GPS or GIS, these things are also should be learned or to be known to the cartographer, because he is going to use or utilize the data which has relevance to all of them. In fact, the last 2 or 3 are recent developments, but geodesy and surveying are all very old technology, but still they are gold in nature, but still things are going on. Probably there may be lot of advancement in surveying technology, but the basics are the same, isn't it? You agree with me? So, he should be aware of all these things: photogrammetry, remote sensing, GIS, GPS technology, whatever is there, all these details he should know. That is a role or the characteristics which of a cartographer. He need not be a master of all of them, but definitely a general detail about every discipline are to be known to a cartographer. That is why he called a skilled cartographer. Of course, not only that, it is very important for one to know or have a idea about human thought and phenomena, because if I am generating a map, if I am creating a map, that map is not going to be used by me, it is going to be used by somebody else. So, I should look from his purview or her purview rather. It could be anybody who is looking at the map apart from me, because I am the generator, I do not bother, I do not worry about looking back at the map, probably other than making some improvements to it. So, from human thought and communication. So, whatever I am going to show it in a map, that detail should be understood by anybody. So, that is what I was telling you, interpretation should be very simple. So, that is another skill is required for a cartographer. And very importantly, as I was telling you about activities like surveying, photogrammetry, remote sensing, GIS, GPS, it is not only that he should be familiar with, he should also know the discipline associated with the environmental aspects which are being mapped. For example, if a individual is creating or generating a map about geology or soil characteristics, land use, or for a near context architectural map or a design, it is very important for him to know or understand, have an idea about the discipline, isn't it? Because he is going to create for example, a geological map. He should know or understand what are the characteristics or what types of rocks are present. How do I represent them? What is the method of representation? So, that is why we say cartographers should be smart or understand these aspects. In fact, majority of the time we find that cartographers are geographers in nature, because they will be exposed to all kinds of disciplines, and then they will be also trained in terms of your say cartography. That itself is a separate science and art. Cartography is a huge science. As I told you, GIS is something like an outcome of cartography. Initially it was cartography, then after improvements it became computer assisted cartography. So, that is what you should bear in mind. Well, coming back to the next aspect, how cartography has evolved over a period of time. We should know that initial stages way back when not many people were there, people were not aware of what exactly is present surrounding them, were not interested to know that. The most of the time it was just rough sketches, but still nowadays if people try to identify, archaeologists try to identify or try to locate details about what has actually happened about the during the previous era. So, in such cases you find that most of the time they look for some rough sketches, which may be just a figurative sketch, which may not be really descriptive, but still it will be of some use indicating what was present then, because you are not going to get back or know about the persons who are living then other than images or this sort of a sketches. So, early periods they were only figurative in nature, ceremonial, and sometimes it was also artistic, because artistic means mostly people were trying to show themselves on say walls, especially caves, because they were not worried about, or they were not aware how to describe features surrounding them. They were knowing more about themselves. So, a kind of describing yourself on the wall, or to show that rough method of showing how a man or a woman were appearing. So, that was the case, and that was the way in which things were depicted long back. Then came the AD period, where in which 100 AD the Greeks were the persons who actually developed the concept of geometry. So, once geometry started coming into the lives of the people who were living, they started understanding shapes, sizes. Most of the time initial stages geometry was more of regular shape, a rectangle, a square, a circle. Slowly people started understanding non-regular shapes of geometrical representation of objects, because you cannot expect a natural feature which is present on the earth's surface, something like a lake, to be of regular in shape, is not it? Unless otherwise it is specifically developed by an individual for a specific purpose. A simple example is a well. Well may be round or square or rectangular in nature, but a lake or a tank for that matter can never be of regular shape. Hence, so most of the times, once though geometry was there, most of the time it was regular in nature in the initial stages. Then they started understanding the non-regular shapes of objects, how to represent them, because it is very difficult for one to show a non-regular shape, is not it? Because the regular shape, you know that a square, a rectangle, square all four sides are equal, rectangle two sides each are same, a circle radius, and we know the radius, once you know that you just draw that. But when it comes to non-regular, it varies from one point to another point. Such things are there, and people started understanding the geometry of the objects as early as 100 AD. Then came in 1200 AD maps meant for say the church maps of the Dark Ages, because I am not going to discuss about the detail about the Dark Ages. A church map, that was the time people started thinking religious importance, started giving importance to religion. So, they thought that people first should know where are the churches located. Hence, they started creating or generating maps indicating churches, and in fact, most of the churches in those days itself were always associated with say educational institutions, invariably schools. Of course, not exactly the schools of what our age is, a little places of learning rather than schools we can call it as. It was most of religious learning, not much of science or your mathematics, which was not there in that age. So, we had church maps of Dark Ages indicating the location of the churches, how to reach from that particular village. It was more restricted to say to the village part of it, the place where people were residing. So, that is one part. Then we had in 1300 AD Renaissance, which brings a major expansion of world knowledge, especially travel. People started moving from one place to another place, because they thought that we are not the only persons who are living at that particular place. Somebody else is there somewhere else. So, let me start moving around and know what is present surrounding me. So, travel started improving, and they started understanding the movement from one place to another place to know what is present where. So, that is the way things were started moving during the 1300 the Renaissance period. Of course, We call that 1680 period as the Enlightenment period, where the Western science and the most important thing is your how the positional details were important in terms of accuracy. If I were to show a specific object on a given terrain, if it is a drawing, I just told you geometry will take care. But when it comes to positional accuracy, wherein which I intend to relate the objects which are in Africa with an object which is present in say Asia. In such a case, you need the positional accuracy. Even otherwise, to get something like say accuracy with respect to distances, accuracy with respect to position from one point to another point, or of the same object over a period of time, the positional accuracy of the object is absolutely necessary in GIS or map making. Hence, that was the time 1600 to 1700 AD, people started getting the Western science, that is science which was in vogue at that particular time. Many inventions, many discoveries were all very much in vogue at that particular time. So, they started understanding, oh, this is the place where am I, this is the place where the other gentleman or lady is residing. So, this is the way they started understanding the context of spatial or positional accuracy. Then we had the very important period, namely 1800s. So, that was the time when people started understanding the relationship between place and space. So, they started understanding the thematic maps which started entering into the lives of individuals. So, 1600 was the period to know about the positional accuracy. 1800 AD is the time when people started understanding the space, that is referring the object to a particular space. For example, anything and everything which is on the surface of earth will occupy space. How do I represent that object on a sheet of paper from real world? This is what is the essence of your map making or cartography. So, during that period people started understanding or started relating place to space, see how important it is that. And then they also started understanding the importance of thematic map. Thematic map is nothing but, of course, we will see in detail later. Just for you to know what a thematic map indicates is that it is about a specific phenomena. It could be all roads in a given sheet of paper, it could be all trees or plants. Within that you can also talk about one specific plant in a given terrain. So, this sort of a detail indicating a specific phenomena was that which was developed in that during that period itself, thematic maps, and it started coming into the lives of the people, into their environment, and they started understanding that. Well, that was the time they started working with map making in understanding the importance of that. Of course, once we started coming into the say 19th century and the 20th century, they found that during the 20th century, 1950s plus till now, everything has started changing. So, they started trying to relate environment with say reintegration of the themes and concept of cartographic modeling. So, 1950s, later after 1950s, people started understanding the environment as a whole, earth as a whole, how to relate the objects with one another. So, this is the way or the period when everything started changing. People who are working on simple methods or simple aspects started working on various aspects which has got relationship to space, environment, and then depict the detail. Of course, we can also say that after that particular time or period, the advent of computers started entering. So, let us stop with this for this day and see other details in the next lecture. Thank you.